What are the strangest Make-A-Wish requests that were actually received? Story 1. I worked at a hospice and we had a wishing program. One of our patients, a 24-year-old with brain cancer, wanted to hold a sloth. Apparently, sloths are very nervous creatures, so it's a little tricky to actually hold one. I found a local company that does visits to schools and whatnot who had a sloth. Now, sloths only poop about once a week, and the sloth could only travel the day after he pooped, because if they get nervous any longer than that, and the sloth has stress diarrhea. So basically, we had to wait until the sloth pooped and then set up the visit for the next day. The sloth pooped on Thanksgiving, so we set up the visit for the next morning. The patient was able to hold and pet a very sweet sloth. The patient died about 3 weeks later, but I'm very happy I was able to give her some joy in her final weeks. Story 2. Not Make-A-Wish, but my brother got terminal brain cancer when he was 18. He was given 3 to 6 months to live. Back then, his only wish was to be an NFL player, but he was 5'8", all heart. He was just like Rudy in the Notre Dame football movie. He fought it for 6 years. Somewhere around his 22nd birthday, he and I were talking about having something worth living for. I told him it didn't matter what it was, but a vision for the future that he could fight for was important, and encouraged him to find something to give his life to. We went on a vacation soon after that, and because we were broke from medical bills and 4 years of battling cancer as a family, this was a huge deal. We hadn't had a family vacation for a long time. A family friend put us up in their beach house and gave us some money to have a good time there. My brother came alive on the trip, and it was so impactful on him that he came home and decided to start a nonprofit organization. He called it A Week Away, and it was very similar to Make-A-Wish. Basically, terminally ill sick patients apply and benefit from all the expenses paid to vacation with their family or group of caregivers. That was a big deal to him to include the family because if you've ever gone through something like that, you know it's not just the patient who suffers and loses their freedom. It's everyone they are close to. He worked his ass off to start the organization. He formed it and began sending families to places like the Outer Banks and Ocean City and other East Coast beaches. A week before he died, he launched his first big month-long fundraiser, and he passed away knowing that he had raised enough to send like 10 families on respite weeks. It was like he was passing the baton off to others who kept on fighting. One thing that I noticed right off the bat is that this guy was given 6 months to live when he was 18, and then 4 years later, he is still kicking and going on a family vacation. I love to see the toughness and the body's determination to keep fighting and keep going longer. It does take some courage to dig deep down and find the strength because you know you won't be able to fight it off forever, and your body can only take so much, but you have to keep crawling along for every second of your life. And by the sounds of it, he made the most of it and left a lasting impression. Story 3. This wasn't Make-A-Wish, it was a local radio station, but I swear every single part of this is true. I probably still have the master tape. Around 25 years ago in the mid-90s, in the town I lived in up in the far northwest of Scotland, there was a community radio station. We were trying to set up a local radio station, so we had a 6-week run using borrowed equipment from Moray Firth Radio to gauge popularity and interest. Now, the first program in the evening after the news was one run by a couple of high school students. We'd got a few kids in, and they'd record a few indents and stuff. Then at 5 past 5, their show would go up. Tunes they liked, shout-outs to their friends, that kind of thing. They loved it. They had a blast, just tremendous fun. Now, there was this one wee guy who was a wheelchair user who wanted to do a program, but he couldn't get into the studio because it wasn't wheelchair accessible. It was up a long flight of stairs in the old nurses' accommodation in the local hospital, and there aren't many wheelchair user nurses, and certainly not in the 1950s when the hospital was built. He couldn't even get carried up the stairs because he had severe spinal problems, and that meant that his back, chest, and internal organs were pretty squashed, and he had to be moved very carefully. He was one very sick boy, and there was no way he was getting up to the studio. He was totally out of luck on that one. But no, he wasn't, was he? Because it occurred to me, we could tape his program with one of the portable recorders that we had, give him a track listing, and I'd cut it together, play it for him, and if he was happy, we'd play it out for him. He wouldn't get to do it live, but the next best thing, right? So we did. I dropped off the tape recorder, microphone, and so on, and a day or so later, I collected it from him with his running order, track list, and a stack of CDs. Perfect. He even sounded like he really bashed on his script and sounded pretty damn good. Copied the tape to 1/4 inch, copied the tunes to 1/4 inch, edited it down, and boom. Except he had a cold, a snuffling, snottery cold. Every sentence was punctuated with snotty noises. I can tell you now that a sniff is about that long on 3 to 3/4 inch per 1/4 inch tape, And also, the cats absolutely love to play with all of this brown ticker tape confetti that you're flooding the bedroom, where my editing gear was. And there were dozens of them. 18 hours of cutting, sticking, redubbing, finding a bit of dead air, just the right tone to fill the gap, cutting, sticking. But when his program went to air, it sounded amazing. Story 4. I was a cancer kid, so I know quite a few people who went through the same process. I went to Yellowstone to camp and see a wild buffalo, and I also volunteered at my local wish-granting foundation. One very young girl wanted to go on a hunting trip. They sent her and her dad to a hunting lodge, where they ended up breaking the lodge record for the biggest buck ever shot. She wanted the entire thing stuffed, and to this day in her house there is a massive deer, body and all, standing in the living room. Another kid really wanted to eat bugs because he was a really big fan of the Survivor shows, and they had a chef come in and cook bugs from all around the world in various ways. He really enjoyed it. I also just want to say that a ton of kids want to go eat a WWE pro wrestler, and they're normally the kindest people. A lot of kids want to meet celebrities, and they only give them 5 minutes, but the wrestlers really try to make an experience. John Cena is great. Apparently, Robin Williams was also the best wish granter. He would take the family out to eat, pretend to be a genie, take the kids to stores and buy them things. And if he was in their town, he would try to visit. I never knew anyone personally that met him, but the president of the foundation said that they very much mourned his loss because he was so terrific for so many of their kids and their families. Story 5. I was a Make-A-Wish child in my province. I've had brain cancer since 12, and I still have it today. My wish was initially going to meet the cast of Hawaii Five-0 in Hawaii, but then I ended up also wanting to get this MSI pre-built gaming PC. When I told them I wanted that, they said, "You sure?" I don't remember what happened, but I wasn't until I was 16 when I got my wish for a VR gaming setup, and I built my PC at Canada Computers right before the pandemic and the GPU shortage. Feels good, and as of now, my treatment is stable, and I've only gone through radiotherapy 2 times. My only thing is there isn't much space in my room, so having the base requirements for a VR play area is kinda sad. Hopefully I can get a bigger area though, because I like playing in VR since it's nice. Those are 2 very different and very random wishes. I sort of get if you're a huge fan of a TV show to want to meet the cast and crew, and in this case, sounds like the wish would also incorporate a trip to Hawaii, which sounds like the cherry on top as well. That's an amazing place to visit. But then it takes a quick 180-degree turn. You go from wishing for a vacation in paradise to meet your idols to that I want a computer. Seems like those 2 ideas are a little far apart, but to each their own. It's not my wish, so I can't really judge. Story 6. I was a chef at a fancy steakhouse in Jacksonville, Florida, and one day my proprietor came to me and said, "This is Stacy, the new girl. She'll be training with you." I look over, and it's this adorable little girl in a bright pink chef coat. I babysat my little cousins at the time, so I was actually pretty used to entertaining 10-year-old girls at the time. So I showed her the ropes. We made all kinds of stuff that were on the surface kind of random, like candied bacon, cornbread, prosciutto-wrapped Bursin cheese, stuffed asparagus, a sweet tea brined pork chop, a sorrel garnish salad type thing, and some other cool garnishes. We were having fun. I then made a puree out of the cornbread and let her plate up the dish a few different ways to show her how you can play with ingredients and height to showcase different parts of the dish. She had a blast. It was only at the end, when the father came up to me in tears, that I realized what was going on. At that moment, I was a little upset because nobody told me, but I realized it after that it was for the best. I probably would not have been as bright and vibrant with my lessons had I known. But it was a fulfilling experience for sure, and I hope their family is doing well. Side note, I have reworked and reran the dish as a special a few times in memory of that day. It was that impactful. Story 7. One of my closest friends had a second bout of cancer in his mid-20s. It was his dream to join the military, but due to having cancer in his teens and major spinal surgery related to it, he could not. He asked to meet Don Shipley, a guy who runs the civilian Navy SEAL camp in the South and also regularly calls out and tracks down phony Navy SEALs. Don wasn't able to travel up to meet him, but Don called him and they had a great conversation. He told him, "I hope you beat this thing and that the beers are on me." Unfortunately, he didn't beat his bout of cancer and passed away at home with his family, but I and another friend took turns helping take care of him near the end, and mostly just gave him company in his last days. He had a hospice nurse as well. I still miss him. Story 8. My daughter had a genetic neuromuscular disease with an average life expectancy of 24 months. Now, most children with this disease are above average intelligence, and this child was extremely intelligent. Most children are only putting 2 words together, but mine was saying 7 to 9 word sentences. Make-A-Wish typically wants the child to be 3 years old because most children younger than 3 are not able to express their wish. She was only 2.5 and able to tell them exactly what she wanted. She wanted to meet Barney and Baby Bop. Fortunately, they were owned by Disney and we got to meet them at Give Kids the World. And it was great that we got to go to Disney because she also loved and got to meet all the princesses. She loved the parades and Animal Kingdom too. And another plus, my mother was in a short remission with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and was able to make the trip with us. My mom died 2 years after the trip, and my daughter died 13 years after the trip. And yes, she lived to be 15 years old. I love these stories of kids beating the odds by a huge margin. Living more than 5 times longer than all the doctors predicted is pretty incredible to say the least. I hope that she was able to continue to take amazing Disney trips and other family vacations before she died too. It sounds like she was incredibly intelligent and a thoughtful girl. Story 9. Not weird, but a funny experience. Through a similar organization supporting young adults with cancer, my best friend was offered tickets to One Direction. She accepted, and the organization had about 50 tickets, and she asked me to go. Now, One Direction were right at the peak of popularity, but we both only knew one of their songs. We decided that we should really know a few more songs before we went, so we trekked to a record shop in her wheelchair and asked the young guy for their album. Which one? He asked, and turned out they had released 3 records already. When we got to the concert, we thought the warm-up act was the real band, and were gobsmacked to see 5 guys in One Direction as we thought that there were only 4. Apparently since then, one has quit. But when they sang a cover of Teenage Dirtbag by Wheatus and the young girls in the front announced, "Oh my God, this is their new song, it's so relevant," we knew that we were far too old to be there. Also, as the concert was mostly for 12 to 17-year-olds, the bars were closed. It was a fab day regardless, and it always makes me smile when I remember it. Story 10. Wish child and wish granter here. Strangest wish that I heard from a fellow granter was that the child wanted to visit his dad in prison. That's all he wanted, and wouldn't be talked out of it. She offered to make the drive fancy at least because it was 2 hours away with a limo and a fun car ride, and he declined. His wish was to simply see his imprisoned dad, and it was granted plain and simple. The wishes I granted were pretty traditional, Disney or other vacations, but my weirdest wish was more sad. It was for the family of a girl who was completely immobile and had very low cognitive ability. The house was run down and reeked of weed, and the home nurse was literally crying while holding the child. Her sibling said that she wanted a pool. I was fuming, so we talked with the mom, who couldn't leave her own bed for unknown reasons, bong on the nightstand, and she agreed a pool wasn't the best idea. The nurse recommended a chair that the child could sit in that would rock her and calm her. Wish granted. Story 11. A friend of mine is a canine police officer. He helped make a wish, grant a wish to a set of twins with the deadliest form of cystic fibrosis. Most of the time, kids with CF aren't allowed to be around others with it because of cross-infecting bacteria. Them being twins shortens their life expectancy even more. Well, these 10-year-old boys wanted to meet a police dog, and my friend and some of his buddies upped the wish, and during their meeting with this dog, they got called to help solve 3 crimes in their town. They pulled over a hijacker, found and arrested a robber, and then helped a missing 6-year-old, my friend's nephew, and the town police department gave them certificates and honorary police badges for their work. Around 200 people showed up to where they had got their rewards to cheer them on. And at the 11th birthday, they gave my friend a plaque that they made with their dad thanking him for the best day ever. An inspiring team effort all across the board. It is good to see how everyone came together with this one with some creative thinking to make the dreams become a reality. I bet that canine also was just loving all the attention too, completing a mission with his newfound young buddies. Guaranteed that those boys were just raving about the experience afterwards and talking about it for quite a while. Well done. Story 12. I had the privilege of working for Make-A-Wish at their national office for a number of years. Here are a few of my favorites, as best I can remember them. 1. I wished to be a worker in a pickle factory. Turns out that during his chemotherapy, the child's favorite food became pickles, and one of the few things he could manage to enjoy. So he wanted to meet the people who put the pickles in the jars. The organization made it a very big deal, and you bet those pickle factory workers were thrilled to experience his joy that day. There was a photo in the office of this little boy in a hairnet with a beaming smile as he watched pickle spears move by on a conveyor belt. Melts my heart. 2. I wish to have the experience of a World War II fighter pilot who crashed on a deserted island. During some of his hospital days, this Wish kid had visits from a few veterans who visited the hospital and told him stories of their experiences. He became really interested in military history. Make-A-Wish worked with a big contingent of people from Hawaii, including the U.S. military, flew him to a little uninhabited island in Hawaii, and he got to experience with his dad and a few safety experts what it was like to be deserted for about 48 hours. 3. I wish to have a pet dragon. Now, this was a tough one. Out of Idaho, I believe, to make happen, but this child wanted a pet dragon that he could train. So, the volunteers started thinking about how they could make this happen and stumbled across someone who had some experience in this sort of thing. The creator of the Furby. Make-A-Wish set up a meeting between the two of them to help design it, and the Wish kid was able to eventually get a little mechanical, very lifelike, think toothless dragon he could train. 4. I wish to be a national park ranger. This wish was featured on CBS Sunday Morning. This Wish kid loved the outdoors, and national parks had played an important role in how his mom had met some very important people in her life. He spent a few days learning the ropes of being a ranger at Yosemite National Park and was even named an honorary park ranger. Story 13. In Orlando, there's a place called Give Kids the World Village that was started by a Holocaust survivor who learned about a kid whose wish was to go to Disney, but the kid died before the arrangements could be made. He swore that he would never let that happen again and opened this volunteer-run village that has housing, food, there's even a 24/7 ice cream parlor, handicap-accessible rides, an arcade, movie theater, you name it, and they've got it. They provide transportation to and from all the different parks, Disney, Universal, SeaWorld, etc., as well, and it's really amazing. Before I started volunteering, I thought that going to Disney was kind of lame to choose as your wish. But then I realized just how amazing it is for these kids to get to do all of this with their entire family. A lot of families shared that their kids enjoyed being at the village more than the parks themselves. I can't say that I'm surprised that some people prefer a slower speed village to a whole huge Disney park. The amount of people that flood through those gates every day is borderline ridiculous. So many people. And if you already have a disability or an illness, I'm sure that all the crowd noise can get a bit overwhelming and just a bit too much. In the comments, any stories about the crowds at one of those big theme parks? Story 14. My brother has NF1, which is a condition that causes large non-cancerous tumors to grow over major nerves, and my brother had a baseball-sized one in his armpit that threatened to cause him to lose control over that arm forever. As a result, my mom asked a Make-A-Wish person if he qualified for one, and he did. He played around with the idea of going to Harry Potter World in Universal Studios, Florida, but ended up deciding on a week-long trip to Japan instead. We ended up staying at a high-end hotel in the middle of Tokyo, went to Japanese Disney World, which was, coincidentally, my first experience at a Disney park. We traveled to Kyoto to get the best street food I've ever tasted, hiked up a mountain that was teeming with monkeys, and I also caught diarrhea there for some dubious water, and then other than that, it was great. And we went on a Tokyo-wide tour that began in a second hotel, which was probably the single fanciest place I've ever gone to. The bathroom stalls were placed on the opposite side of a bridge over an artificial water to give you an idea of just how fancy this place was. It was an experience I'll never forget. And we got to ride in a limo to and from the airport.